Awesome. Happy 2026, everyone. Cannot believe we are halfway through January already. Hope everyone is having a good start to the year. And we are so excited to be back. And we are back and better than ever. We today have on Jonas Sickler. He is the Senior Brand Marketing Analyst at Terakeet. He has been at Terakeet now for 11, going on 12 years now, which is such an awesome, fantastic feat. So, we're going to be chatting to him a lot about that career progression, what's been happening in his role, what he's been seeing going on in the industry at the moment. And the topic of conversation that we're going to be touching on is the hottest topic at the moment, which is AI and how brand can be playing a part in the source for AI. Jonas has just been working on a project at the moment, a POV report that we're going to be chatting about as well. He's been spending the past few months on that. So, yeah, there's lots for us to discuss today. So, Jonas, without further ado, thank you for coming on. How are you keeping?
Thank you for having me. This is gonna be a really great discussion, and we are fortunate to have had three huge announcements from Google this week. So I think that plays into a lot of the topics we're going to be talking about, and it's going to be an exciting year, no matter what you do in marketing and especially in SEO.
Yeah, it feels like we're watching the F1 at the moment or something, just with everything that's coming our way. Jonas, a fun fact for everyone that's listening at the moment is that Jonas also is an illustrator and an author for kids' books. So I really love that and love the creativity and the passion around that. And I thought a fun question to kick things off for the webinar is, as an illustrator, if you had to draw a picture of what search is looking like in 2026 going into 2027, what would you imagine it as and why? Would it be something like a library, a cafe, a nightclub? How would you paint that picture?
Well, yeah, it's funny because coming from an illustration background, there's
Mm,
actually so much similarity in creativity in SEO. You have a lot of problem solving, which is the same kind of brain waves you have to tap into for understanding how to like convey ideas. So,
mm,
great question, very cool question. I think I foresee search as becoming a lot more human over the next 2 years, more connected, relatable, personalized, and adopting a stronger guide-like role for everyone. Right now, it's very just kind of like search a word, get a bunch of links, and scroll through them and read some content. But I do think it's going to become more of a human-like guide for us. So
mm,
that's sort of the theme. I think I would illustrate maybe somebody standing on top of a mountain, extending
mm.
their hand to the audience and almost like inviting them on a journey, saying like, where do you want to go? The entire world is open. Where can I take you? And how can I help you learn?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So with that in mind, I think one thing that we were chatting about, leading up to this webinar is what you've been working on with your POV. Do you mind, I think, before we dive into the conversation on that, just maybe giving the audience a little bit of a brief breakdown on why you started the POV, what inspired it, and yeah, I think what was the results that you've maybe seen from that?
Yeah, I think that as a community, SEO tends to be very focused on sort of tactics and to some degree strategy around how can we measure AI generative search and how can we influence it. But I've always been very interested in consumer behavior and connections specifically, and how one thing influences another. I think that's kind of the part of SEO that's always excited me. And sort of as my role evolved, I've moved into more of a market analyst type position, but focusing on search. And so one of the things that I started doing was I wanted to kind of just understand what the space was and how it was evolving, and all the different stakeholders that were being affected by generative search and how it was different from traditional search. And as I started to put those pieces into place and zoom out, I started seeing all these connections and how the one thing impacts another. Like as consumers or searchers start searching for things and getting the answers, and they click through less, it's not just a decline in traffic that has to be explained, but that has an impact. There are, the entire marketing ecosystem will be impacted by those changes, and everything from business models that rely on traffic to the levers of influence and how you can actually change and influence the responses in the text, to the metrics that we measure. All of these things are going to be changing. I think the changes will ultimately be positive, and that the SEO community will be a huge piece in helping brands navigate through all those changes.
Mm. Awesome. I think just building off of that, one thing I found really interesting about your career progression as well was that you had moved from, or you'd started in brand marketing, then I think built up your career from that, if I'm correct, in brand marketing, and then for 5 years went into SEO manager position, then digital marketing analyst, and then back into brand. How was your sort of perspective evolving on the relationship between brand and SEO during that time when you were SEO manager and then stepping back into brand?
Yeah, I think that as I started off in the brand space initially, it was kind of like launching a website, a consumer-facing website, and having to tug on all the different levers that you have to do in marketing. There's, what does the design look like? What are we going to publish for blog content, and how are we going to do social media marketing, and all the different pieces that come together when you have to build a brand. And then I
Mm,
really loved this sort of problem solving side of SEO and the immediate impact of being able to understand what consumers need and how can you publish content on that, and then optimizing it for both the credibility that consumers want, or users when they're reading the content, but also the search engine side, and how can I gain visibility and then use SEO to sort of build a brand. And that was kind of what pushed me into that, and understanding the content side, the SEO side. And then as time went on, I became really infatuated with how consumer needs really are surfaced through search. And that led me back into the brand side, and being able to kind of understand how can we use search data to uncover what consumer needs are, because they're literally telling us what they want, instead of relying on survey data, which is going to be sort of often maybe biased. But search data is, I think, a cleaner set of what consumers are looking for and the intent behind it. So that kind of led me back into the brand side.
mm. Awesome. I love that. And I think just moving back into the POV that you were chatting about, and just tying it back into that maybe tour guide standing on top of a mountain looking out into the vastness. Kind of feels like what generative search is happening right now. And I think for those that are still trying to grasp its true like sort of scale of it, how do you sort of define a generative search in a way that, like, gets grasps that the level of where people can go with it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some blurry lines between what is an LLM, like where, because everything's evolved so quickly. Initially, ChatGPT was this LLM, and all it did was just kind of tap into its training data and answer questions, and it didn't do a great job of it. And then similarly with any model that's trained on data, it tends to have inaccuracies and hallucinations. And
Mm,
then where it has moved is where we've got like Google with AI mode, AI overviews, and ChatGPT now tapping into search. Because those models are now grounded in search, they're able to pull recent data, recent information, and not just rely on the outdated cutoff dates for the training models. And that makes them a lot more reliable and, I would say, trustworthy. But at the same time, now we've got these new announcements from Google for personal intelligence, and Gemini being used to power Siri coming up down the line this year. And no doubt
mm,
that means Apple Intelligence will also have personalization. So I think that when you tap into the like your own data on your own device, if you opt into it, now what you've got is not just an LLM that's pulling from some training data, but also able to tap into your own personal data and also the data on the web to be able to answer a question that is much, much more um, personalized, contextualized to you, and answers questions that are important to you as an individual, rather than sort of like generically general knowledge answer questions.
awesome. I love that.
And Jonas, we're seeing a lot, sort of both sides of the fence between SEO, especially on LinkedIn, saying that AEO and GEO are the same thing as SEO, but we've also had clients, agency clients, that have lost big contracts when they're tendering for them because they haven't mentioned AEO or GEO in those pitches because their clients are looking for those buzzwords to sort of sign off on it. Is there a difference between the two? How should SEOs adjust their strategy for generative search compared to more traditional search, if that makes sense?
It does. I think you're absolutely right. We talk about this all the time in the industry, and it's a constant debate. I think that I always tend to like try to ask, why is there a debate? And because SEO does feel different in some ways than GEO, they're both grounded in the same fundamental strategies of optimizing things to show up in search. And I think part of that is why the debate exists, because there's one faction that says, no, it's exactly the same. We're just optimizing for search engines. And the other side saying there's something different going on, different tactics work. PR is more effective than in generative search than it is in traditional search. Owned assets that people tend to focus on their websites. When you're in SEO, that's your main focus, is what am I going to do on my website? But generative search is a bit expanded into more PR and reputation management, where you have to think about the other third-party narratives that are happening, what's driving those narratives. And so, yeah, I think that the industry is evolving in a way. I think that there are some fundamental things that remain true with SEO moving into generative search, but the industry has to kind of like think about, how does this change user behavior? And if we're moving away from sort of the click economy that SEO was built on and paid was built on and digital marketing was built on, and moving into a recommendation economy where the value comes from being mentioned, but also being mentioned in the right context and with the right sentiment, and is the mention accurate? So I think SEOs have to kind of like pull back a little bit and start collaborating much more closely with those PR teams, the brand teams, to understand how can we help them influence the narratives? What can we learn from those teams? Because they're already good at narrative influence, but they're also not great at understanding how indexation works and how search works in general. So those two teams need to share what their strengths are and come together and work on a sort of a new discipline underneath brand, perhaps.
Awesome. And just to follow up, you mentioned a few towards the end there, but SEOs or future SEOs who may be either coming into the career or will be coming into the career in a couple of years' time, is there any skill sets that you think they will start off differently than maybe what SEOs 20 years ago were doing, or maybe 10 maybe?
That is a good question. I'd say what's similar is still understanding. SEOs are really good at trying to figure out what influences rankings, and so they'll need to translate that same curiosity of digging into the data to find out what influences the text. And I have no doubt that we'll keep doing that as a community, as an industry, is figuring out like, okay, what are the most important levers to pull? Is it content chunking, or is it repeating the narrative across many different domains, or is it being more concise? Is it link building? Is it focusing on the sources that are most trustworthy? I think it's that digging in skill that's gonna be the most important. But I think the things that are definitely different are, we're looking at sort of a much more personalized contextual queries with prompts that don't have search volume, and SEOs are used to sorting by search volume. What are we targeting? Oh, we're targeting the things that have a lot of volume and a lot of intent. But if we're moving into a place where those searches are sort of fragmented in a way, where you no longer have a single keyword set that is hundreds of thousands of searches, but rather you start to have to break that apart in your database and say, well, this single prompt actually carries multiple intents. It might be cheap insurance for bundling in New York State or something like that, where now you've got to think about, okay, what brands are known for cheap insurance? What brands are known for good discounts on bundling multiple policies? And so you have to break those things apart. And I guess, the industry's kind of leaning into that as query fan out, but sort of understanding how your brand is represented for each of these attributes, and thinking about search as more optimizing for your brand and your ideal customers rather than keyword sets and pages. How can you translate that optimization to the broader brand and your products and services to understand who's your ideal customer, and are you being recognized as the right solution for each of those attributes that you think that you deliver value. What's your value proposition on each of those things?
Awesome. Yeah, you were mentioning, I think, in the previous answer just about the how measuring clicks and how that's sort of like falling out, and the how the teams need to be working more with like the PR side of things, and the overall brand. I had a question on that, which was just talking about you mentioned about the secondary metrics of visibility and sentiment and how those are becoming more important. And I think this is the question that I had is kind of, it's two-sided. So the one side is more just asking about how SEOs can communicate over to stakeholders about traffic, maybe traditional traffic having fluctuations, especially throughout this year, and also more to what your message would be to stakeholders as well, in terms of what should they start prioritizing more, in terms of what they should be looking out for.
Yeah, I really think it's going to depend on individual industries or business models in this case.
Okay.
If you're in an industry that is solely the business model is built around traffic and clicks, that is going to be a big problem. If you're in a media brand that everything is about ranking for informational queries with high volume to get the traffic to generate ad impressions, or ranking for mid-funnel queries where you're sort of influencing the consideration sets of like what's the best product for X, Y, and Z, and they publish the content and they list out 10 brands, and then they put affiliate links in that content. Those businesses are going to be at risk, and they will absolutely. I don't think that there's a pathway where they can continue monetizing the traffic in those situations. So in that case, SEOs are going to have to become really clever at business decisions and helping the businesses evolve in different ways. How can they license their content to models, or move to a subscription model, or something different where they're not monetizing the traffic, they're monetizing the value that they're bringing in some other way. And then on the other hand, there's going to be a lot of businesses that sell products and services where the transaction still remains with the brand itself, and they're still able to sell those products and services. I mean, people aren't going to buy less things because chat-based search is eating up traffic. The transactions still have to happen with the businesses. So I think in those situations, SEOs are going to have to maybe rewrite the way that they used to report against value. And instead of saying, well, we grew traffic by this much in the last 12 months, they need to reframe it and maybe only look at, if they're looking at traffic at all, only look at it through the lens of like conversion focused traffic. Are we gaining or losing traffic for the very small set of keywords that we really care about and prompts that we really care about? Are we influencing when there is an AI overview? Are we in the recommendation set? First of all, are we even being mentioned? If not, how can we be mentioned? And then if we are being mentioned, is it in a favorable sense, or is it kind of an afterthought, or is it worse? Is it, you should avoid this brand because consumers say X, Y, and Z, and find out how to control that narrative. So I think that in those cases, SEOs are going to have probably difficult conversations with stakeholders and leadership. If they've been reporting against things in over time that now they're saying this is no longer valid. But I think that those are important questions to be able to say, this was the model in the past, the model is now changing, and what we need to do is start focusing on a completely different set of metrics, whether that is visibility in models, if that's citation control in other cases, because they have different purposes and they need to be kept separate. Is, are we being mentioned? And then the other is, are we controlling the actual text that is being produced? In that case, it's more, if something is describing our products, is it doing so correctly? Is it telling consumers that we don't ship our products to certain places that we do, or that is it misrepresenting our return policies? Is it surfacing a handful of very old customer reviews that are negative, and maybe we should focus on building a new set of reviews because we don't even sell those products anymore? I think SEOs need to kind of come together with those PR and brand teams and say, everything that we were doing in the past worked in the past. Now things are different. Here's what we need to focus on, and kind of help drive the conversation forward with leaders, rather than waiting for leaders to step forward and say, the traffic keeps going down. What are you doing about that traffic? They need to kind of control the conversation to say that isn't what we're focused on anymore. Here's why, and here's what we need to do going forwards to sort of step forwards and lead the conversation.
Awesome. And on that, you sort of touched on it right at the end there, and then also you talked about how important the conversions are going to be sort of here on in as well. With obviously the rise of AI search and more sort of zero-click results now as well, how do agencies, how do brands stand out when it's going to become increasingly more competitive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know there's definitely I think PR is definitely going to play a bigger role than it used to in terms of getting mentions across multiple sources. And some of the things that consumers are going to encounter, I think brands are going to encounter, is that the consumer journey is going to look very different. I think there used to be a lot of references to how many touch points there were. Maybe it was like 12. It was like 12 touch points that consumers would have before making a purchase. It was like a common stat, because the journey was often so long. But as generative search is able to really compress the journey down from the first question through consideration through decision, almost into a single conversation, because of follow-up questions that you can ask. Follow-up questions are not part of AI overviews, but they are in AI mode, and as that gains visibility and adoption, I think that's going to become a lot more common, where the initial prompt or question might be captured by tools, but then there's all these follow-up questions and refinements that happen throughout. So I think that even though the clicks are going away, I mean, they've literally become commoditized informational queries, because most of them are where the AI overviews are providing the answer. And in the past, brands would say, well, that's how we can build relationships with customers by publishing informational queries. They come to our site, they're engaged with our brand, and we can market to them through downloadable content, or chase them around with retargeting ads here and there. And so that builds the relationship. But now consumers aren't even paying attention to the citations. They just want the answer to the question. So they start noticing brands deeper in the funnel now. I think that the battleground is going to end up being that the non-branded queries that lead to brand mentions, where consumers haven't yet formed an idea. They know they have a problem. It might be like best credit cards, best travel credit cards, for example. They don't have a company in mind that they want to work with. They're just asking for a good solution. And then that LLM, that ChatGPT or AI mode, is going to produce an answer that lists a bunch of credit card companies. And those are going to be the really the hot competition terms. And then the next set is the branded queries, where consumers are like, okay, I've got a list of companies that I want to work with. And then they start looking for reviews, or does this product was recommended, but what are the reviews? And then in actuality, they might find that that they have terrible reviews. And so that means that if there are inaccurate and old and out of date things listed for branded searches, then that's another area where brands have to focus on. So it's almost like SEO on one hand, and then reputation management on the other hand. They have to understand what's being said about them and how are those things being surfaced. Because the top of the funnel will have 0 clicks, and the middle of the funnel might lead to branded search, and then that's where the clicks start happening.
Awesome. And you mentioned obviously the digital PR becoming more and more important. Do you think agencies will have to change their sort of offering to no longer have silent or siloed, you can pay for SEO, you can pay for digital PR? Are they going to have to become under like sort of one package? And is that those two departments going to merge into one going forward, do you think?
I think they could, at the very least, and it probably depends on what kind of companies agencies work with. If you work with very small companies, they won't have PR departments. If you work with sort of a mid-size or a disruptor brand, they might. And so you might want to find ways to work with their existing teams, their existing PR internal teams or their PR partners that they externally work with. It depends on, I guess, on how each business size and what your agency customer base looks like. But I would at least become familiar with how PR speaks about value and what metrics they use, and start thinking about incorporating those into your offering as SEO companies. You don't have to necessarily go full on and bring in a PR team and start doing PR necessarily, but you definitely need to be familiar with how that side of the industry works, so that you can partner with those agencies and start adopting some of the practices that do influence these generative responses, because a lot of PR doesn't, and it's not designed to. But you need to figure out what parts do and start incorporating those into your model.
Awesome.
Fantastic. I wanted to dig into a little bit of a juicy slash, forgive my pun, soupy sort of topic next. But you were talking about a few questions back just about, how companies may need to, if they had bad reviews prior, like how they need to assess this and stuff. And the past month, the Campbell's Soup crisis was trending quite all over social media and things like that, and everyone was sort of pulling their own takeaways from it, and I know you did as well. Can you tell us a little bit about it, and how does, if for anyone that doesn't know about it, and how does generative AI sort of hallucinate slash amplify brand crises, and why this is sort of, what happened when stakeholders' attention, gets crossed during that time, and how do you even manage something as chaotic as this?
Yeah, that was, I mean, I have a dashboard that I track all these crises for Fortune 1000 companies every single day, from the news feed to the search results. And you can see day over day the relationship between huge spike in negative news sentiment, and then when something pops into their search results, their organic search results, based on how much control they have over their search landscape. More control generally keeps those things out of their organic search, although you still can't influence the fact that a news in the news module pops up in their search results. It's going to happen. But one of the things that I've seen in generative search specifically is that you don't generally get an AI overview popping up for a simple branded query like Campbell's company or something. It doesn't usually happen unless there's a huge splash of news around it. Then it does. But people tend to ask more specific questions. They know that the brand is in the news, and they might ask, why is Campbell's in the news? And that is usually something that will cause the generative response to trigger, and then it'll start immediately synthesizing the news cycle that's trending right now. And often what happens is the news cycle breaks before the brand has had a chance to respond to it. So the crisis is then like lopsided towards away from the brand and towards the negative press. And a lot of things can be synthesized that it may not be accurate, that may be circumstantial. And then even I've seen a lot of cases where when something is trending that's negative, that the generative systems tend to try to find all of the related content about it online, because they're able to search everything and contextualize it and then synthesize it. So they will often pull from old crises that maybe have been gone for a year or two or three, and that aren't really part of the same narrative, but then they're woven into it in the description, and it says, oh, they've had past problems with this legal thing and that legal thing, and that makes it sound like they have a pattern of abuse, or some, the brand problems go much deeper than this individual crisis that might be trending at the moment. And so brands, I've found that Campbell's did a really good job of immediately publishing their own piece that said, it was literally like, what ingredients are in our soup, and they kind of listed things out, and then they put that out as they had to in their PR opportunities to have news outlets and media outlets link back to that document and reference that document. So whenever somebody would reach out to them, they'd say, here's our page, go see that. And so then over time, what we were seeing is that the narrative shifted from the accusation to the accusation and the response. And then the response that Campbell's gave started overtaking the original accusation, and the tone of generative search started to change from being Campbell's was accused of including 3D printed meat in their soups to Campbell's denies all of these accusations, and they've vehemently proven otherwise, and that these are false accusations. And like the language started taking on a tone of you shouldn't believe those things because they were false accusations, instead of questioning whether it's true or not. However, in that period in the middle, I was seeing all kinds of things surface that were sort of like what ingredients are in the soup. I was seeing things like mechanically separated chicken and all these weird things that would send consumers down a rabbit hole of, well, what is that? And then they would search that thing and they would go, that's really gross. I can't believe that's in the soup. And then you would find like really old tear sheets and press pages or something that were from the company that listed those ingredients in their soup that were, from a different type of a product that were just very old, like half a decade old or something, that were being surfaced online. So initially there was this period of confusion, and I think brands have to really act quickly. And probably one thing they can do better job of in this world of generative AI is starting to do audits to find out what content is out there that could be pulled in. If you do search things like controversy and crisis connected with the brand, what's likely to be surfaced, and can you get rid of that stuff or change the narrative around those things before the crisis breaks, so you have a little more control at that moment.
Awesome. I know we're running over time at the moment, but I did want to ask one question, but there is someone named Jonathan who just popped in a question now. If you can answer this, he said, what tools should we be demanding from AI platforms to market well in the future, aka Search Console updates for AI? I know it's a black box of unknown data right now, but what should we seek from Google or OpenAI to be more effective in the near future? Do you have any?
Yeah. I mean, that's Jonathan, thank you for bringing it, because I know monitoring is a really big topic right now. Just trying to understand what the models are saying and what are they sourcing from. I think that it's what's important when it comes to choosing tracking tools in general, whether it's a tool that comes directly from ChatGPT or Google, or something that's on market from another provider. We need to understand, not take it for face value that you have visibility into some sort of data that is coming from these models, but ask the questions about how are they tracking the prompts, and kind of evaluate from an SEO perspective. We're used to like thousands and thousands of keywords that we need to track. Prompts are different from that because they are longer and they're more topical. And so we don't need to track every single variation of the prompt. We just need to understand, maybe we only track 10 or 15 or 20 prompts, just to basically understand how are these tools referencing our brand in that topic and that theme. So number one is just kind of like rethinking what our needs are for tracking in these tools. And number two is understanding how they are getting the data. Are they using an API to run queries and prompts and pull the data out? Or are they actually running searches the way a user would, which is the way that they should be doing it, because otherwise you're getting a different data set, and that doesn't help you if the data is bad that you get it. And then understanding like if they're measuring sentiment in a response, are they looking at the entire response and calling it positive, neutral, negative? Or are they looking at individual brand mentions within that response and saying this brand mention was positive, that one was negative, so that you can more accurately understand how your brand was mentioned in the context of the entire response, which can be long, not just saying, well, this was a positive response, or we got a mention, good job. The mention might be negative. So I think the complexities of understanding how these tools work is the first step, and that will help you choose the right ones as they emerge on the market. I think that when we start seeing advertising getting pulled into tools like maybe ChatGPT, or definitely into AI mode, Google probably will be the first player to introduce full-on ads in AI mode, and AI mode as the default search experience. I think when that happens, there will be a lot more visibility into prompts and how brands are mentioned, just because marketers that are paying for ads are going to demand that. And then that'll help those of us in the organic search side trying to understand how those things are tracked and mentioned.
Awesome. Wow. Way to put you on the spot there, but that was very well answered. I am aware that we've run out of time, but yeah, this was such a wonderful conversation and such a great way to kick off the new year. So many interesting topics discussed, and yeah, I really wish we had more time
Yeah.
just to.
Hey, if you want to add, if you want to like tag any questions or something that we didn't get to in a chat on LinkedIn or something, I'll just pop in and answer them there, and we can keep the discussion going on LinkedIn.
Definitely. And I'll also I'll pop the comments for the Campbell Soup crisis below as well, because I thought that YouTube video was very interesting too. And yeah, everyone go follow Jonas as well on LinkedIn if you have any questions or you want to chat to him as well. Thank you so much for such an informative webinar to kick off the year. Feel very refreshed and a lot of insight in this. So yeah, Jonas, thanks so much for joining. Thank you everyone else for joining as well and for tuning in for your questions. And have a great weekend. We'll chat soon.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you.
Awesome.